Abraham didn't just believe in God. He packed up his whole life and walked it out. He's called the father of faith, but many people think Abraham was a perfect hero or just a name in an ancient family tree. He wasn't. He was a real man who made real mistakes, waited a long time, and still trusted God enough to move when it mattered. Let's break it down. The background. Abraham begins as Abram, living in a thriving city called Ur in ancient Mesopotamia. Genesis 11:31. Think busy markets, tall temples, and many gods. In that world, your security came from your homeland, your family, and your idols. Then God speaks. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Genesis 12:1. That is shocking in the ancient world. Leaving your clan meant leaving your safety net. But God also gives a promise: land, a great nation, and blessing for all families of the earth. Genesis 12:1-3. Abram goes. He travels to Canaan with his wife Sarai and nephew Lot, living in tents and moving with flocks. This is a nomadic life. Open skies, dusty roads, and constant dependence. He builds altars along the way, marking the ground with worship instead of walls. In that culture, covenants were more than contracts. They were life and death bonds. When God later makes a covenant with Abram, animals are cut in two, and God's presence passes between the pieces. Genesis 15. In their world, that meant, may I be torn apart if I break this promise. God binds himself to the promise. The conflict. Key events. Abram obeys, but the road gets rough. A famine hits, and he heads to Egypt. Genesis 12:10. Fearing for his life, he lies about Sarai being his sister. It's a moment of fear, not faith. God protects them anyway and brings them out. Back in Canaan, Abram and Lot's herds grow too large to pasture together. Abram lets Lot choose land first. Lot takes the lush valley near Sodom. Abram trusts God with what's left. Genesis 13. God repeats the promise. Count the stars, so shall your offspring be. Abram believes, and God counts it to him as righteousness. Genesis 15:6. That's a key sentence for the whole Bible. Trouble returns when foreign kings capture Lot. Abram gathers men, pursues them by night, and rescues Lot. Genesis 14. On the way back, he meets Melchizedek, a mysterious king-priest, and offers him a tenth. Even then, Abram knows his victories come from God. Time passes. No child. Sarai suggests a common solution of that culture. Have children through her servant, Hagar. Genesis 16. Abram agrees, and Ishmael is born. The house becomes tense with jealousy and pain. God doesn't ignore Hagar. He sees her, names her son, and promises a future. But this wasn't the path God intended for the promise. Years later, God renews the covenant, changes Abram's name to Abraham, father of many, and Sarai to Sarah, Genesis 17. The sign of this covenant is circumcision, a physical marker for Abraham's family. God names the promised child, Isaac, meaning laughter. It's a promise wrapped in a chuckle of disbelief and hope. 3 mysterious visitors come to Abraham's tent. Genesis 18. Abraham runs to serve them. Water, shade, fresh bread, a feast. Hospitality isn't optional in his world. It's sacred. The visitors confirm, Sarah will have a son. Sarah laughs in the tent. God hears the laughter and promises joy anyway. Then comes a heavy scene. God reveals that Sodom is marked for judgment. Abraham steps forward and intercedes. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? He argues all the way down to 10, Genesis 18. Abraham isn't just a receiver of blessing. He's a neighbor who pleads for mercy. Isaac is born. Joy bursts into the tent, Genesis 21. But conflict returns. Sarah asks Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. It's heart-wrenching. God cares for Hagar and Ishmael in the desert and promises to make Ishmael a nation too. God's larger plan will still run through Isaac. Then comes the hardest test. God tells Abraham to take Isaac, the child of promise, and offer him on a mountain, Genesis 22. The text is spare and quiet. Abraham rises early. Isaac carries the wood. Where's the lamb? God will provide. At the last moment, God stops him. A ram appears. Isaac lives. Abraham learns not only to love the promise, but to trust the promiser. God reaffirms the blessing. Through your offspring, all nations will be blessed. In the years that follow, Sarah dies, and Abraham buys a field and a cave to bury her, the first piece of the promised land he actually owns. Genesis 23. He sends a servant to find a wife for Isaac from his extended family, not from the surrounding tribes. Rebekah arrives with generosity and courage. Genesis 24. Abraham dies at a good old age, satisfied, having seen God's faithfulness. Genesis 25:8. The meaning lesson. In Jesus' time, Abraham was the spiritual anchor for Israel. To be a child of Abraham meant identity, belonging, and promise. But Jesus pressed the meaning deeper. He said, "If you were Abraham's children, you would do what Abraham did." John 8. Not just bloodline, faith line. Jesus even said, "Abraham rejoiced to see my day." John 8:56, pointing to a larger fulfillment. The early Christians read Abraham as the blueprint of faith. Paul said Abraham was counted righteous before he was circumcised, Romans 4, meaning the door to God is opened by faith, not by ritual or performance. He also said the promise, "All nations will be blessed through you," finds its center in Jesus, Galatians 3:8-16. The writer of Hebrews places Abraham among those who lived by faith, looking for a city with foundations, built by God, Hebrews 11:8-10. So, what does Abraham mean for us today? He's a picture of trusting God when the map is blank. He shows that faith isn't the absence of questions. It's the presence of obedience. He proves God can work through flawed people, slow timelines, and impossible odds. Abraham wrestled with two mindsets, fear versus faith, and control versus surrender. Fear makes us lie to survive. Faith tells the truth and trusts God with the consequences. Control tries to force timelines, Hagar and Ishmael. Surrender waits on God's promise even when it hurts. Real faith isn't passive. It walks. It builds altars. It intercedes for others. It ties the rope of hope to God's character, not to our circumstances. Abraham's story also whispers something personal. God knows your name and your future. He speaks into barren places, marriages, dreams, careers, hearts, and brings laughter where there was only waiting. And when he asks for the thing you love most, it isn't to take from you, but to show you he is enough and he will provide. Quick takeaways. Faith moves. Abraham left home before he saw the map. Faith waits. The promise took years, but God was never late. Faith surrenders. Abraham trusted God with Isaac and found God's provision. One more. Faith blesses. Abraham wasn't chosen to hoard favor, but to share it. That blessing ultimately flows through Jesus to the whole world. So, who was Abraham? A wanderer who became a father, a flawed man who trusted a flawless God, and a signpost pointing to Jesus, the promise who brings blessing to every nation.